full attention and participation as necessary in today's workshop. And with those opening remarks, I'd now like to hand you back to Madam Chair. Thank you.
Merci beaucoup.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much for that reminder to set the context, the background and our objectives. I'm now going to follow the same working method as did Mrs. Pilar del Castillo, who chaired the previous workshop. And I'm going to suggest that two colleagues now speak to start off with. First of all, Mr. Ivo Bellet and then Mr. Paul Rubig. And then we'll hear from two representatives of member states, from two stakeholders, two partners. And I'd just like to say that Mrs. Valian has also been added to the list of the members of the European Parliament. But first of all, Mr. Bellet. So everybody, each speaker has 5 minutes speaking time.
Thanks very much, Chairman. I've put my watch in front of me so that I won't forget to look at the time.
Excusez-moi, j'ai fait une bêtise.
Sorry. I've just made a mistake. I had forgotten to hand the floor, first of all, to Mr. O'Donoghue, following on from Mr. Byrne. I do apologise, and we'll get back to Mr. Bellet a little later. So, first of all, Mr. O'Donoghue.
Thank you, Madam Chairman, and my apologies to Mr. Bellet. I'm sure the fault is ours as we have given rise to a last-minute change to the programme. My job, and perhaps why it's useful for me to speak now, is not to make any sort of detailed presentation, but just as this discussion starts, to remind you very briefly of the main points of the proposals made by the Commission last year, because those proposals, to a large extent, were framed in a forward-looking sense and required a discussion on the radio spectrum policy programme as the vehicle in which a number of the medium and long-term actions would have to be discussed and instrumentalised if the European Union was to develop a coherent and agreed policy in this area. The proposals from last October were in the form of a communication setting out the policy context and a roadmap of measures, as well as a Commission recommendation on certain short-term measures. In preparing and presenting the Commission's proposals, we first of all looked at the importance of the digital dividend and identified this as a unique opportunity to realise economic and social benefits across the European Union. With a lot of the preparatory and study work that we had done, we were able to put an estimated figure of a value of the digital dividend of at least 150 billion euros, a figure which could be increased many times depending on certain assumptions that were being made in the analysis. But certainly it was clear to us that a coordinated approach at European Union level would give a further boost beyond what could be achieved by the Member States of between 20 and 50 billion to the European economy. And within that, in the use of spectrum for modern technologies for growth and innovation, the digital dividend spectrum has the greatest scope for innovation because of its technical characteristics. Our proposals were based on certain presumptions, which again, of course, are worth discussing as it is useful to test the hypotheses as we move forward. The most important, of course, is that broadcasters are the principal beneficiaries of the digital dividend, and for the Commission, the continuation of existing broadcasting activities in digital format was a prerequisite for any policy proposal. At the same time, and we've heard the echo of this discussion this morning, the digital is not the property of any one sector. In fact, it's not the property of any sector at all. It is a public good. But that there would be, with regard to the provision of content and broadcasting services, a spectrum bonus for broadcasters to incentivise them to modernise their equipment, to take the advantage presented by technological innovation, to increase the quality and the scope of the programme and content provided. It was also a major opportunity for Member States to review and extend the scope in possible circumstances of general interest objectives, but that of course needs to be justified, and any grant of spectrum associated would need to be subject to rigorous checking. Following that, there was nevertheless a huge opportunity to extend wireless broadband and to bridge the digital divide. And that is what led the Commission to its proposals, which set a preference on flexibility, using the innovation with regard to service and technology neutrality of the revised framework to be applied to the rest of the digital dividend. We identified the potential benefits for Europe of a coordinated approach, and then we made specific proposals with regard to short-term actions, medium and long-term actions. In the recommendation, the Commission called on Member States to confirm 2012 as the date for analogue switch-off. That is essential if we are to have the digital dividend to work with at all. We also then asked that there be a support for efforts to agree harmonised conditions for the 800 MHz band, which is one part, 15 or 18% of the UHF band, which is where the digital dividend discussion has focused in the first instance. We also called on Member States to refrain from any action that could hinder or impede the deployment of wireless broadband services at a European level using economies of scale. The communication supported these arguments and talked about a short-term action, which is the adoption of this 800 MHz decision. And I'm now daring in the Parliament to talk about comitology, but last week the Radio Spectrum Committee gave a favourable opinion to the draft technical decision, which hopefully will be adopted by the Commission at the end of April. There is a key point, however, just as we debated on the GSM directive. The policy and political decisions must be discussed and decided by Member States and Parliament. And that is why any decision in the long term to fix a closing date for the use of the 800 MHz band for television or any other use must be decided by the European and Parliament. We also identified strategic actions, including, with regard to the role of the Council and Parliament, the possibility in the future of having proposals to cut off the 800 MHz band from broadcasting use, but also to identify important developmental issues such as spectrum efficiency, compression, transmission technology, and the use of better technologies in the future so that we will have greater flexibility and we will be able to identify future needs and the corresponding spectrum. That is where the Commission's proposals left off. That is where the discussion starts today. So with that, Madam Chairman, I will give you back the floor. Thank you very much.
Merci beaucoup.
Thank you very much. I'd like to thank the Commission for that rather condensed summary of their work and their proposals, and I'd now like to hand the floor to Mr. Bellet for 5 minutes.
Thanks very much, Chairman. I will try to be as concrete and as brief as possible. I'm a member of the ITRE Industry Committee and of the Culture Committee, so the result being perhaps that perhaps results in some sort of hybrid position, but I'll try to do it as balanced as possible, and use the discussion topics as guideline. First of all, what are the decisions that have to be taken in the short term? Let me begin by referring to the digital TV receivers that we want to be what we call future-proof, and must be ready to at least operate, ready to operate with at least one of the new generation of compression standards. That as a first remark. Second remark, perhaps it has already been made here, but we would like to stress on the fact that Member States have to put in place proper review procedures in order to guarantee, to make sure that all the licensees, all the owners of the digital dividend spectrum actually use the spectrum in accordance with what they have committed themselves to. So that the spectrum, of course, part of the spectrum does not remain unused. So therefore the demand for review procedures. And third aspect, the remaining broadcasting networks that use today the first generation compression standards should of course be encouraged to transfer, to migrate them to the next generation by a fixed date. Don't know which date, 2015 or 16 or later, but establish a fixed date. And now something about the costs that this whole operation will entail. I would like to refer to the holy guiding principle of those who cause the costs also shall bear them, meaning that with respect to the UHS band, that providers of electronic communications services that possibly will be responsible for potential